Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my jarring co-host, Brett.
Jarring. I don't know what you're talking about, Alice. Today has just been a boring day where nothing's happened.
Absolutely not. And you know what? It's been such a jarring day, I can't even put two and two together. We're about to get into it, but thank goodness we don't have to be the ones to put it together because we have some of our favorite friends, fellow podcasters, Kevin and Anya of the Murder Sheet, here with us to explain the jarring news of the day in the Delphi case. Anya and Kevin, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so delighted to be here.
And, we always planned on doing this because we knew this was going to be a big hearing because we knew there was going to be some discussion of these leagues. And just to give some people some background, if somehow you stumbled upon this and you don't know, Delphi case is ongoing. It's been heated. It's been contentious. The defense attorneys have been as out there as you could be, recently filing a 130-page motion alleging this is all a ritualistic sacrifice of the girls. And in that motion, providing a lot of description of the crime scene. Description based on photographs that were obviously in discovery that were provided to them. Photographs that were subject to a protective order and that should never be released to the public. And everyone knew that. Every attorney knew that, and they had been admonished about that. And there are certain protective measures you're supposed to take just, as a person to ensure that that kind of discovery doesn't get out. You were talking about CSAM before we started child pornography type stuff. When we handle those cases, that evidence is kept under lock and key, like in a locked filing cabinet in a locked room, just to make sure that it never sees the light of day. And this is similar stuff, the really brutal stuff. And then word leaked, and there was some reporting from these fantastic reporters from Indiana who have a podcast that, in fact, some of these crime scene photos had made it into the light of day. Even now, still a little unclear to me how that happened. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. And it became evident fairly quickly that however this happened and whoever was responsible, the leak was coming from the defense side of things. And that was going to be something that was going to be addressed in this hearing. And there had been speculation that this was such a severe violation and such an act of gross incompetence, if nothing else, and gross negligence in handling this, that the attorneys might even be removed, which led to something I have never seen before. Now, and this, I guess, is where one place we can start. I have never seen an attorney in a case who represents a defendant hire another attorney to represent them and file something in the court arguing on their behalf. And that's what you had here. One of the attorneys for Richard Allen, who was accused of this murder, had to hire an attorney who filed something today arguing that he should be able to stay on the case. I have never seen anything like that. Is that something that you guys have seen before?
No. It seemed like something out of a farce, to be honest. It was just like, is he going to have to hire an attorney next? Like, what? It was just, it was bizarre. And we've actually talked to that attorney. We interviewed him on our show. He goes by Mr. Murder. He's a very well-known defense attorney here in Indianapolis. And he's a great interview. He's very kind of ornery and interesting. But yeah,
lots of great stories.
We did not expect to see him be brought into this.
I mean, those of us who may not know what filing you're talking about, can you walk us through the day? So everyone was leading up to this hearing that your podcast kind of gave the background to. No one quite knew what the hearing is going to be until about this weekend. And going into this hearing, it was potentially going to be an evidentiary hearing. What led to the leak? What was going to happen to the leakers, the potential leakers, the source of the leak? And then this morning, a filing came from who you call Mr. Murder. Was he part of this case previously? And what was filed in this brief?
He was not part of this case.
He was not part of this case. He primarily criminal defense. He's done lots of homicide cases, hence the name Mr. Murder. He is retired. And actually, he has sort of a business relationship with a criminal defense team, which is the Andy Baldwin's firm.
And so for the filing that came out today, it's kind of a complicated thing because you can't bring cell phones into this courthouse. They will destroy your cell phone. They will throw it in the dumpster and crush it and all that. So we were kind of like running back and forth between our cars so we could kind of like check and see if anything was happening. And we'd learned that there were some filings. Some were filed under seal. Others were filed publicly. One of the ones that was filed publicly was from David Hennessy, aka Mr. Murder, and he just outlined here's why Andy Baldwin and also Brad Rosie should be able to stay on this case and not be removed. And so I think that gave a hint to everybody what the hearing was going to be about.
And let me
it-
ask this. Sorry, Kevin, but this may go into what you're about to say. Was this typically when you file something in court, it's in response to something? It's either moving the court to do something, so like a motion to stay a case, it's a motion to dismiss the case, or it's in response to someone asking the court to do something. In this case, wasn't what was filed called a memorandum and not a response or a motion?
That's right. Yes, it was a
Yeah.
memorandum.
So there was no formal request to get these defense attorneys removed from the case. But certainly there's been an undertone, especially recently from the prosecutor and even the judge, that they are fed up or frustrated by some of what the defense team has been up to. We've talked a lot about this 136-page motion they filed outlining their theory that it was a ritual cult murder. In addition to that, they filed a lot of repetitive motions about things like they believe that their clients should be moved out of a prison and into a jail. And they filed a motion about that back in April. It was heard in June and they lost it. And now they filed it again about a month ago, even though no external facts really changed. And Prosecutor McClelland in this case felt like I have very limited resources and you guys are making me go back and make the same arguments and the same points over and over again.
All the while grandstanding, according to McClelland.
And let me ask you this, because one thing that's frustrating about this case, and it may just be this is the way Indiana works. It is surprising to me is how secretive everything continues to be.
Yeah,
And so like this was going to be a public hearing, but it was like secret what it was going to be about. Like when the judge issued the order, it was like, and other issues that have arisen. And we all knew what that was just because you guys had figured it out, basically. But were there, do you know of like preliminary discussions, conference calls, telephone conferences, filings, things under seal where this was hashed out a little bit before they walked into court today, or no?
We don't know for sure about anything like that, but we strongly imagine that once the news of the leak started circulating, that there would almost have to be some sort of like, let's all get together, figure this out, and some, or maybe something more contentious than that. We do imagine that would have had to happen going into this, but that's just speculation on our part. Indiana is weird. Indiana is very secretive. It's really annoying, and I think it really adds to a lot of the speculation and nonsense that happens in this case.
And I thought that the way it was done today it was very secretive because the prosecutor brought a bunch of witnesses to offer testimony, including the investigator who had investigated this entire thing about the leaks. And that person was prepared to testify. And as it turned out, the judge just came out and said, well, they withdrew. So that's that.
Bye, everybody.
And so the public is never going to hear that information, at least not in this venue. And I feel that sort of secrecy adds fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories.
And so before we get to that, because you're right, that was the bombshell, right? Everyone thought it was going to be hearing about one thing, and then it quickly ended in a matter of minutes. But before we get there, what, part of the secretive, I can't talk today. The secretness of everything was amplified when you had this filing that we were just talking about, because it listed out basically the factual argument from the defense's side when no one had offered another point of view. No one had affirmatively come out and said, we think that the defense did X, Y, and Z, and these are the bad actions. But it was as if it were in response, in conversation to a side of the conversation that you guys and us, the public, were not privy to, which I think was very confusing. And some of the facts that came out in that particular filing were bombastic, to say the least. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about the facts that were coming out of that, and how much of it did you know, and how much of it was, just confirming maybe some rumors you had heard?
Well, basically, it confirmed the story we had been hearing that we've been able to piece together. Essentially, Andy Baldwin runs a very unusual type of criminal defense firm. He's highly collaborative. That means that the other attorneys in the firm he'll go and he'll bounce ideas off of them, give them all the information about his cases. I'm thinking about trying to do this. What do you think? And he'll do that not only with the other attorneys, he'll do that with paralegals, secretaries, just anybody at all. So that's the environment. And he had this friend there who worked with him, actually, in a non-attorney role, who left the firm under pleasant circumstances a few years ago before the Delphi case. This guy comes back to visit the firm at some point, and according to the defense filing today, when he arrived, Attorney Baldwin was busy with a client, so this gentleman goes into a conference room and he sees some pictures from the case lying on a table. So he snaps some photographs of them and then later shares them. He shares them with a friend of his, and this friend of his then shares them with a variety of people, including the gentleman who sent them to us. And what's very sad about this case is the person he shared them with, first, his friend. This gentleman committed suicide shortly after the investigation into all this began.
It's so tragic, and our just hearts go out to that man's family. I mean, it's really hard to overstate the negative impact this horrible situation has had on so many people.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is truly no longer an armchair detective case. Real lives are being impacted. I've never quite. This is my worst fear. I think we've said this before on past cases. My worst fear is any case I'm working on, anyone who's touched by it feels like there's no out in whatever situation they are, that they feel like the only way out is to end their own life. I've never had to face that in my own cases. And I was very jarred, to bring back that descriptor from earlier, when I read that, thrown in my opinion, quite thoughtlessly into this public filing. I think that people had heard about something like this, but not in the form of a narrative. And as you noted, many things in this case have been filed under seal. A lot of things are under, kind of cloak and dagger. I don't understand why that had to be put out there like that. I thought it was incredibly thoughtless to the person and his family, and it was not necessary in order to make the argument that Mr. Murder was trying to make to the judge in this advisory filing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things he said was that all this would come out anyway. All of it would be public anyway during a trial. That is not true. Those photos of those girls should never be public. Even if they are shown to a jury in a trial, there will be steps taken. Even if the trial is televised, there will be steps taken to make sure that those photos are never released. And this, we could do a whole nother show on, and maybe we should at some point, on what this says about true crime and media coverage and how all these people got so wrapped up in this and this public, it's funny because there's a gag order, and yet the 130-page memorandum basically just threw all this out into the public, and there was a feeding frenzy and people lost their minds. And obviously these people lost their minds because they thought it was the right and just thing to do. And you guys talked about this some, about how giving grace to people, what they did was terrible, but in their minds, wrapped up in it the way they were, and not being able to see outside of the little box they'd built for themselves, they thought this was the right and just thing to do, to get those photos out there so people would know the truth. And that's what they were telling themselves, and never even stopped to think, what are we doing? And then it all starts collapsing in on them, and law enforcement starts talking to them. And I think, they realized some of what they did. And I think, unfortunately, one person, I wish they had once again stopped and thought a little bit more. You never know what's going on in somebody's life, and you never know what else is happening, but it'd be quite a coincidence if that was unrelated, right? And it's just such a absolute tragedy on so many levels, how this spiraled out of control. And I think it's worth noting, and I think that filing by Baldwin and his attorney, just one thing we should all be clear about: photos of the crime scene, and including photos of the girls, were leaked by the defense, even if not intentionally, right? I mean, these photos there's no question about that. There's no conspiracy. Even if it was an accident, and exactly as Baldwin described it in his thing, his inability to maintain control of those photos is what led to this happening. That's 100% right. Right?
It was admitted in that filing, right?
It was
Yes.
admitted in the filing.
They're not disputing any of the facts. And that's why people will talk about this, but the conspiracy theories of I think if they came back and said, we didn't do this, we don't know who this guy is. Like, he never worked here. You guys are making that up and you're trying to frame us. Then I think we could all say, okay, well, maybe there's more to the story. But they're saying, no, this is exactly what happened. And yeah, that's kind
And to
of
be clear, the part that's not disputed is that the defense has agreed to the fact that it came from the defense side. Now, I think the way they've characterized it could be up for debate, but we're never going to know now because obviously the investigation wasn't allowed to be part of evidence. And here, here's my conspiracy theory is that obviously this was going to be an open hearing. There were witnesses, and I think it was made very clear that this judge wanted things on the record and wanted things out in the open. And it was going to be very bad for the defense when everyone testified, because the fact that this filing came out before the hearing, trying to lay out their side of the story, suggests that they knew what the other side was going to say. And likely, you're not supposed to bamboozle the other side. So police reports were likely turned over to the defense. The defense knew what the witnesses were going to say, because again, there's no bamboozling. That's not how court actually works. They get to cross-examine, but they knew what was going to be testified to, and they knew that cross-examination wasn't going to poke holes into it. And so before it all came out, I think there was no choice essentially for Baldwin to have to do what he did, which, will you explain to us? You're sitting in the courtroom, you think we're about to have a hearing on an evidentiary hearing about the leak. You guys don't have your cell phones. Can you walk us through what happens and how you begin to find out what's going to happen, which is different than what you expected?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we're sitting there. It's a beautiful courthouse. I want to stress this. This is awful situation unfolding, underneath just an absolutely beautiful courtroom. It's like in green and all this kind of marble decor, and everyone's very antsy because it kind of felt like we were like in some sort of dream, because like nobody near us had a watch. Everyone, you couldn't bring in your Apple watches. Some people had, kind of old timey watches, but they weren't sitting near us. So people were like asking the bailiffs, like, what time is it? And it felt like we were like there forever. But I think it was like about like 15 minutes past. It could have been longer. It's getting delayed. Suddenly, Kathy Allen, who is Richard Allen's wife, there's some interaction between either her and Rosie or her and Hennessy, one of the attorneys, and she's looking very upset. She starts to leave. Allen's mom starts to leave, then doubles back and grabs their coats and leaves along with the attorneys. And we're just like, okay, that really does not look good. Like, what is going on here? And then at some point after that, it seemed like Judge Gull kind of comes in. We all rise, we all sit down, and she's just basically like, well, this was kind of a shocking turn of events, but everyone's they've withdrawn, and so we can't have a hearing because he doesn't have representation.
And specifically what she said was Attorney Baldwin has made an oral motion to withdraw. So oral motion, especially for maybe people who are not attorneys, may not know the difference between a written motion and an oral motion. So Kevin, can you, kind of explain to us what that meant, and also the timing of things when that oral motion would have been made?
Yeah, it kind of felt like that oral motion had just taken place in the judge's chambers. And an oral motion is basically, he didn't file anything. He may have just said something like, okay, I'm done. I want out. They were in the chambers. We saw Baldwin go into the judge's chambers a couple of hours before the scheduled start of this.
He looked really sad.
He looked like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. And
let me just, for people who don't know how these things work, just basic sort of like when you have these kind of hearings. So, people ask questions like, why would they file that motion and then withdraw? Like, they didn't understand that. And, the motion was prepared probably yesterday, maybe even before that. It's filed. They would have arrived at the hearing. One of the first things that would have happened, as Kevin was saying, they had a bunch of witnesses. Prosecution had a bunch of witnesses they were going to put on. We've talked about discovery before. Discovery works a little differently when you have hearings like this. This is not a trial. You don't sandbag people, but you don't have to give them a whole lot of heads up.
Time.
So what could have happened? Exactly, time. So what could have happened is prosecution gets there, defense gets there, and the prosecution says, look, you filed this thing. This is what you said happened. We're calling this witness, and this witness. Here's what they're going to say. Doesn't sound like what you filed. We're just letting you know that's what's going to come out in this hearing. So that could have been the first thing that happened. And the second thing, oftentimes before these hearings, before the public hearing, the judge will ask the lawyers to come back into their chambers. This happens all the time. I've had this happen in very normal hearings, sentencings. We'll go back and talk to the judge, and sort of everybody will get on the same page before we go out and sort of do it for real. A lot of times that'll happen. And it seems like this judge said, hey, I want y'all in my chambers before the hearing. And I think there were a lot of discussions about exactly how this was going to go, and that motion they had filed wasn't going to work. And that's why you saw that, what seems strange to somebody from the outside, the filing of this motion, and then all of a sudden you withdraw.
And really quick to add to that, you're right. The oral motion, you typically do that when you say, Judge, I'll follow it with a written motion later, but you do it on the spot. So we do this all the time. It happens all the time. We'll be in a sentencing hearing and something will happen and we'll say, okay, they did cooperate. We're going to file for, a reduction in the sentencing guideline calculation, but you don't want to halt the hearing, leave, go file it, come back so you can make the oral motion. But you're right. Those oral motions typically happen because you don't have time and it's on the spot and time is of the essence. And that's why you make the oral motion. Now, why would time be of the essence in this case? Well, the second they walk out, you start having an evidentiary hearing. And I completely agree with Brett right there. The memorandum, I'm not even going to call it a motion because it wasn't a motion, filed, on behalf of Attorney Baldwin, was likely prepared. It looked like it was prepared quickly, and it was filed at the time it was filed, because just like the prosecution doesn't necessarily have to turn over all of the reports well in advance, the defense doesn't want to tell the prosecution their story because it gives them time to come up with an alternate response, right? And that's why we saw the filing of the motion, I believe, so close in time to the hearing. It's because the defense was also holding back their story until the last minute. So what you had basically was two people coming in at the same time after many people were waiting in long lines to wait for the hearing. And all of a sudden you had two very different versions of what was going to happen, and the results, what was going to happen was going to be very bad for somebody. And that somebody was probably going to be the defense attorney because of what was filed for them and what was going to come out. And I think the judge said, are you sure this is what you want out on the public? But what do you think, Kevin and Anya?
I think you're onto something. We're aware of at least one discrepancy or something that doesn't quite line up between what was written in the motion and some evidence we're aware of. When you read the motion, it makes it sound like there was a one-time breach. There was one incident where this former associate, this friend, just happens to go into the conference room and see these pictures and take photographs of them, and then that was it. But because our source gave us copies of all the text messages he exchanged with his friend, and his friend again is the person who got them from Baldwin's friend. And in those text messages, our source's friend made a lot of comments revealing that he had a pretty deep knowledge of what the defense was up to, what their strategy was, who they were going to try to suggest might be an odinist, and other such things that had not reached the public, even travel plans. This is where Andy's going to go this day. Oh, we just got some records from the state about phone stuff that we think might be helpful. So this suggests that at the very least, there was a flow of information going from the defense to the public, and it wasn't just a one-time breach.
And I want to add to that. So basically, that makes it so that Baldwin's friend could not have just gone into a conference room, gotten what he needed to, and left. He would have had to have been hiding in the crawl space for a week in order to know what he knows, unless he was being told it. And so the filing didn't really address any of that, any of the non-photo leaks. And I think that, it's possible that they addressed it in some other form in some of the sealed filings, but I think the fact that we didn't see that was kind of weird.
One other thing that I'd love your thoughts on. A lot of people think, okay, well, maybe they resigned so that none of this would come out, but did the judge have to accept it? And this is one thing that I want to make very clear. The fact that Attorney Baldwin hired his own attorney to represent him in the same case number as Attorney Baldwin is an attorney in. That's what's so strange, right? Usually you have a separate case. The answer is no. The judge did not have to accept the resignation on the spot. And here's why. Today's hearing was about essentially contempt of court or violating a court order. The court order exists whether you end up resigning or not. And I do think it was a type of mercy for her not to go forward with this hearing because there was no indication, maybe you guys know differently, from her short little, comments on the bench that there was going to be a hearing to get to the bottom of the leak at some point. It seemed like, let's move on from this. And in reality, a court is responsible for running its own docket and enforcing its own orders. And this order is separate and apart from any representation. And so she could continue an evidentiary hearing into understanding how her orders are being violated to prevent further breaches of those orders. But the court also has discretion not to go forward with that. So from my short little, clip on TV, it did not seem that she was going to continue with digging into what led to the breach. But I welcome your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like a coup de grace. I mean, I'm going to tell you, and this is my opinion. This is completely my opinion. I wrote and scripted 3 episodes profiling this judge. So I feel like I kind of got a little bit of her style and kind of understanding of how she operates. As a journalist, obviously not as a legal professional, but it is not. This is based on that, not based on anything that we heard or leaks or anything like that. But I felt she was going to fire them over this, over the severity of the leak, the consequences of the leak, and just the violation of her orders. I felt like that was what the outcome was going to be. So I kind of, that's why we kind of went back and forth on this. Okay, maybe she'll just sanction them and they can continue, or maybe she'll just kick Baldwin off and leave Rosie. So there were a couple of different theories, but I always felt that this was going in that direction where they would be removed from the case. So I guess I kind of can totally see that where it's like, she got the outcome she wanted because they left.
And let me just say this.
Yeah.
We focused a lot on the victims and the family, and I think we should, because what happened today to them, not only the leaking of these photographs, but the fact that this trial is now delayed. There will not be a trial in January, no matter what happens. Basically, this is going to start over. We're going to have to get new lawyers in. They're going to have to review all that voluminous discovery the defense kept complaining about. They're going to have to review all that. This is going to have to become their life. They're going to have to decide if they're going to pursue the Odinist theory or do something different. And that's a real thing. But one reason these people needed to be removed is because they, in my mind, had violated their duty to their client. I mean, Richard Allen is entitled to expect attorney-client privilege to be a real thing. And it sounds like there was a third party who the attorney was just sharing all this information with. And what happens when a third party learns the information is that vitiates the privilege. There's no longer an attorney-client privilege. Like, it is I just want people to understand, it is a huge deal on so many different levels to allow someone that kind of access to the discovery, to your strategy, to your discussions with your client. I mean, it is people have asked in the chat, is there going to be a bar complaint? I think there probably is. And he's fortunate. And I think something like this might've been said. If they'd had that hearing, that entire transcript would have gone to the bar. Not
only the bar, but prosecuting him. Right? Whatever came through.
That too.
Truly, because what he's already admitted in the public filing is absolute bar complaint worthy. For prosecution, you know, depends what you charge them with, but there needs to be intent and whatnot. And they were very clear to steer clear of the intent side of it in the public filing. But I think it was going to be much worse in terms of what was going to be coming out as testimony.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And you know, I think, gosh, it's like we profiled the defense attorneys too. So part of me just kind of feels bad for them because I think like, whatever this was, I mean, whatever culture enabled this to happen, it just seems like something that spiraled out of control. And I guess what troubles me now is that since so much of the investigation will remain unknown for the time being, I just think it's going to foment the conspiracy theories of, oh, they were getting too close to the Odin King, and then they were silenced, and it's just going to get even more stupid, as if that could even happen at this point with this case. But
And I think one thing that gets overlooked here is that this wasn't even the first leak.
yeah,
There was a leak in the spring. It was much less severe. It didn't really get widely reported. Basically, there was a gentleman living in Carroll County. He has a long history of criminal offenses, ranging from drug offenses to domestic battery to public nudity. He gets hauled into the Carroll County jail frequently. One of those times he says, "Hey, they abused me. The jailers abused me." He files a suit. Andy Baldwin hears of this. He wants to reach out. Maybe I can use this in my case. And somewhere along the line, after he initiates contact with this gentleman, he somehow accidentally emails him a file containing a list of items in discovery that they'd already received. So he wasn't sharing actual discovery items. He was sharing a list of discovery items. But it's still obviously a breach,
Yeah.
and perhaps a sign of sloppiness. And you would think after something like that, it would kind of scare you straight, but it didn't seem to have that impact here.
Yeah, and I mean, even the Odinism filing, the way it was done, I mean, that was so clearly a press release.
yeah,
And that was the kind of thing, if you didn't do all the other stuff, you probably would have got away with just a tongue lashing from the judge, and you would have accomplished your goal, which is to get that information out to the public. And it would be a little shady, but a defense attorney would tell you, "Oh, you got to do whatever you can to defend your client," right? But you add that in with that, and with this, I mean, this was just, I don't know what else the judge could have done. I don't know how, knowing what she knew, the judge could have just said, "Do better." I think they're in that filing. I think at one point it said something like, Attorney Baldwin vows to adhere to all orders moving forward or something. And it's like, it's too late, man. I mean, it's
That
just
is
too late.
absolutely your
Step
duty on
one.
the front end.
Yeah. Like, I'm glad you've reaffirmed that, but
Now I'm going to
yeah.
follow the rules of the court. Here's one thing, and this is I'm not trying to pile on to these defense attorneys. As I said, on some level, I feel bad for these guys. I mean, a lot of people felt that they were really, talented and on other cases have done good work. But like one thing I go back to, and this is just a minor thing. It's going to sound really nitpicky. I'm sorry, but like they were told in a public hearing,
Oh.
you know what I'm going to talk about. Illinois, Illinois is not Indiana. We're the Hoosier state,
So they in their briefs, they were referencing and they were citing Illinois cases and not Indiana cases. And the judge said,
Don't do that. I don't like that. I don't want to hear about what Illinois is doing. Tell me what Indiana's doing.
and then the next time they file a brief, it's full of citations to Illinois cases.
We
And I'm
noticed
like-
that and mentioned it in one of
Yeah.
our that they did that. I didn't realize that they had been admonished not to do it, because it's like, why are you filing an Illinois case? Like, there's
Roosevelt
nothing in
was
Indiana that helps you.
Yeah. It was like I was shocked when I saw that, because I was like, they didn't listen at all, and she basically called them out and embarrassed them in court.
Open court.
Like there's a lot of North Carolina and Illinois cases in here, but where are the Indiana cases? Oh, I don't know, judge. Da, 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 da. And then it's like back to, I know you love those Illinois cases, judge, and it's like, oh my word, they're not listening. I just felt like there was no real, I mean, I don't know. I would think that it would be good strategy for both sides to try to work with the judge you have and like not do things to alienate them, and I don't know, like have some level of cordiality. I don't know.
And to be clear, I think what the judge said was completely reasonable. The reason it matters whether you cite Indiana or Illinois cases is that there are different jurisdictions and a common law system. And so different courts are going to be persuasive, but they may not be binding on this judge. So it's not helpful for her to know what Illinois is doing, because that is not binding on her. She needs to know what the law requires of her in Indiana. That's why she's completely reasonable, and any judge
Nothing
would
against
say
Bob
that.
Mata, nothing against Illinois.
Love Bob Mata, love Chicago. It's a great town.
Well, but Anya, you said something I think is very, very compassionate, and I think it's worth mentioning here, because we have been talking a lot about the wild journey the defense has brought us on. They they have had long careers. They have been, I think, well known outside of this case. But one thing that people may not recognize is when you're an attorney, you have many, many, many cases, and you typically have a long career. Over the course of your career, you can have hundreds, thousands of cases. And almost nobody has a case like this one. No matter how many cases, no matter how good of an attorney you are, it honestly is when lightning strikes that you happen to be on a case that captures the nation, the world's attention, and media's attention, and you're on the headline of every single news media, and you're on TV all the time. People ask us this all the time. They're like, is there a case that I would have heard of that you worked on? I was like, I mean, if you lived in my town, but that's just not how being a lawyer works, right? It's not being sexy and on TV all the time. And so even though no one, they knew what they were getting into with this case because Delphi had captured the nation years ago, even before there was a suspect, even before there was an arrest, even before there was a case. So they should have known what was happening here. But I do want to extend that compassion that you guys have been so good at doing. It's really hard when you are in the limelight all the time. With that said, though, this judge has given this team a lot of grace and a lot of times for do-overs. And unfortunately, they haven't taken that do-over. It's kind of the fool me once, oops. It was a repeated breach professionally and ethically on behalf of their client that would ultimately put in jeopardy whatever is the outcome of Richard Allen's case. And that's what this judge cares about, because all she cares about is the case before her. And she wants to protect whatever the outcome of this case is, whether it's a conviction, an acquittal, a plea, what have you. And she can't get there if she has attorneys who are breaching ethical and professional rules of conduct.
Really well said. And that's like, I mean, I kind of feel like it comes down to trust ultimately, where it's like, can all the parties trust each other? Obviously, they're going to be fighting their opponents, but are they trusting each other to not like blow up the case? And I mean, and I'd be curious what you guys think about this, because this is something I've been wondering. Like, if they somehow had talked their way into staying on, and he's convicted, I almost wondered if that could open the door for like appeals later, because like I had an incompetent counsel. They were leaking like crazy and it was a mess. They were filing it. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm throwing that out there. Now I feel really dumb, so it's probably wrong, but yay.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably not, but they certainly would have argued it. It's one of those, it's an issue that would have come up on appeal, even if it turned out to be not successful, just because, I mean, look, the violating the privilege thing is like a big issue to me. I mean, for instance, here's something that the prosecution could do. If you've shared the information with a third party, and I don't think the prosecution would do this because this would definitely open up that ineffective assistance of counsel thing. They could seek that information. They could be like, we want the information that this, because it's reciprocal discovery. You get discovery from us, we get discovery from you. Oh, there's something you've shared with a third party. We would like access to that as well. And it sounds like they shared the entire defense strategy with this person. So, it's just, I think that is part of the reason that she felt like she had to remove them, because such fundamental problems had opened up in their defense that whether it would have been a successful appeal or not, Richard Allen deserves counsel who is competent both in the legal sense of the word and just in the sort of, the kind of lawyer you would like to have, which is one who's more focused on you than like impressing his friends with what he's doing or getting his name in the paper, which is what it seems like was going on here. And I appreciate you guys trying to be, kind, because I am sure right now, if I were him, I would be, it's hitting him now, right? Like he was in it for so long. And sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you can't see it. But right now, he's sitting somewhere thinking, what did I do? And I hope his friends and family are around him, because it can be a real crushing experience to feel something like that. But man, I mean, it was just it is such a mess. It's hard to overstate how much of a mess it is.
I mean, for one, he doesn't have counsel yet. He will be appointed counsel because that's what the judge said today, is that he's still in a financial situation where he qualifies for counsel. He'll be appointed new counsel. But guess what? Even when your counsel change, all the filings on your side are still filings on your side. It's still on behalf of Richard Allen. And, we'll see how his new counsel moves forward with this Odinism filing and what they do with it. And this prosecution wants to stay, they just want to prosecute the case. And I think that they'll not drag the defense through the mud on all this Odinism stuff if the new counsel leaves it behind. But it's out there and it has been put forth, not just this is another theory, but this is what happened. Right. And that's something they're going to have to contend with and how they move forward in their representation of Richard Allen.
And another thing, a question that's come up, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are on this. Brad Rosie, we talked about Baldwin a lot. Obviously, he is withdrawn as well. What are your thoughts on that? Is it just the two of them were kind of a team on this, and now maybe it's going to be more of a public defender type thing than a private representation? It didn't really make sense for him to stay on. Do you have any insight into that?
These two guys didn't really know each other at all until they started working on this case together. But I feel it was kind of like when you're in the foxhole with somebody, you guys really bond. And they really seem to form a cohesive unit and become quite a good team and to always be on the same page. So I think it would be difficult to get rid of one and keep the other.
And that's a really interesting note because the oral motion to withdraw was just by Baldwin, but Rosie, she said that she expected a written motion to come forthwith, meaning that he didn't need to withdraw immediately to prevent whatever was going to happen next.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, and this is just my vibe, and like we've been up since like 6 a.m., so this could be totally off base. So please keep that in mind, everybody who's watching. I'm not trying to put
real
out
talk from the murder sheet.
Yeah.
Sleep deprived murder talk.
It's just gonna get unhinged from here. When Rosie was he was the only, we never saw Baldwin come into the courtroom. It's not like he came in and left. He just never showed up, as far as we saw. I mean,
He was in the hallway.
We saw him in the hallway, so it's like he was in the building at some point. But when we were all sitting in the courtroom, he did not show up. Did you see him?
No.
I didn't see him either. We saw Rosie. Rosie's walking around. Rosie's talking to Kathy Allen. Rosie's going around. Rosie looked maybe confused and upset at the end. And that may have just been how he was feeling that day. But like, I thought it was weird that suddenly we're hearing, okay, Baldwin orally withdrew. And I guess Rosie's going to file something to that effect later. And it just, I was like, I really do wonder, like, what this, I mean, we don't know this at all, but I wonder what the sequence of events was.
Didn't you overhear him say something?
I overheard him, and I didn't want to say this because I don't have the exact quote. I wrote it down in my notes, and that my handwriting is horrible. So like, it's probably lost, but I thought I heard him make an exclamation I would consider of confusion. Like, at one point, like, I didn't know that, something like that. And I'm kind of, that's haunting me because I'm like, did he know that his co-counsel had sort of abruptly withdrawn? Was that always the plan? Was it did they just do different, like it was, they both kind of were agreed, okay, at some point we're going to just get out of here. But I just wonder.
I really think they showed up that day and didn't know everything the state had. I really think that's what happened. And I think the state at some point was like, here is our list of witnesses. Here is what we expect them to say. And I think, and this is total speculation. So,
yeah,
I'm not saying this is fact, but I think it seems like there's at least some indication that filing was not entirely accurate. Whether it's not truthful or whether it's just, if you read it in the wrong way, it would mislead you. I'm not sure. And I just wonder if they got in there and the state was like, look, we've read your filing, but these people are going to say this, and that seems to contradict what you said. And that would be the kind of thing, if you were co-counsel and you didn't know that would upset you and would confuse you. I mean, I just wonder, and we'll never know how much of that happened, how much that could, because I've had that happen. I mean, I've walked in before for a hearing and had to go tell the defense counsel, I know you're going to argue this and your client told you this, but I know the exact opposite is true, and here's the information. And then watch them like go over and be like, is this true? Like with their defendant, because they're learning on the fly. And it could have been something like that happened.
And in this situation, just in case some of you listening are thinking, oh, that's sandbagging, a lot of times when that happens, it's because it's an ongoing investigation and you're finding things as you're walking into the courtroom, right? What Brett's describing, that's happened all the time when I have an agent like running to the courthouse and saying, I just pulled this jailhouse call that from like this morning, and he's absolutely coaching his mama to lie, right? And I listen to it really quick. I'm like, you're right. And then I'll walk over and be like, hey, by the way, I'm going to play this today. This is what it says. I know you said in your filing that you're going to say, Mama said he never did that. And they'll go over there and be like, well, gosh darn, this is what they have. And it's not because we're sandbagging them. It's because everything's coming so quickly. With this investigation as well, especially with an investigation that's about a leak, it's going to be a lot of he said, she said, and trying to understand who saw what when. And people's memories may be fuzzy. That type of investigation is tricky, and it's also complex to put together. So I think it's very possible that a lot of this was coming together at the last minute, right? We know that all of this has happened in the last couple of weeks, and they're trying to get to the bottom of what it is. So I only note that because I think it's very important for people to understand why these processes happen, why there was a surprise at court today. I don't think it was intentional. I think this is kind of by virtue of the way the investigation is going, that information is being learned as we are getting closer to the hearing.
Yeah, and we can go through that memorandum, and there's plenty of things to nitpick that don't seem quite right. Another thing that jumped out to me was they said that there was only 3 people spreading the images around, and no matter how you count that, that's just not true because most of the people who received these images sent them to other people, and those people sent them to yet more people. So saying there was only 3 people and one of them is dead of suicide, that just seems like a way to minimize the situation.
I don't want to get into what all was. Do you feel like the leak has been contained?
No, I wish we were really. I mean, when we kind of first reported it, so we got this on October 5th, early morning hours, like very early in the
Like
morning.
2 or 3 days.
We don't get a good healthy sleep cycles ever, so we're that's why we are the way we are. But and it was an awful. I mean, immediately it was just apparent how bad this was, and so next day when sort of sun rose, we called the police, and we also alerted the defense later that day, just being like, there's a leak, pretty bad leak. And so we're kind of alerting both sides because we didn't know where it came from at that point. Then the person who sent them to us immediately was pretty freaked out. I think it was kind of like, very online, very into this online sleuthing and stuff, and then just sort of realized, oh my God, what am I involved in? And sort of wanted us to kind of like give the information he was giving to us to investigators, which we did. I mean, it was kind of on the condition of like, I'll give you this if you give it to them, and we're like, sure. Put us in, we don't really like being part of the story. We like reporting on the story. So suddenly we're like active. It was just, it was just a very stressful time. And then from there, we discovered, once we saw the screenshots that he sent us, we discovered that the person who had leaked to him leaked to at least one other person. And we believe that person leaked to others, because then we started hearing from other people in the space who we're friendly with or who we know of. They're saying they have the photos. And like at that point, we had no reason to not believe them, and we're kind of like, okay. And so, at that point, it just seemed to kind of spiral out of control. We're very concerned that the most graphic images could still be published, and just be awful, destructive impact on the case and to the families and to Richard Allen's rights. And it stresses me out, to be honest, because I just, I hope people, we know some people who totally believe, went to police and deleted them and did the right thing. Like there's people who are like, yeah, we know, we trust you. And then, I just hope everyone did that. But frankly, covering the Delphi case has made me incredibly jaded about people and true crime. And so I don't know.
And here's a good PSA, which I know you guys have already said repeatedly on your podcast, but we'll repeat it here as well. Don't fuel this. Don't be the fire. There has been a leak. It should not have happened. It is in violation of a court order. It is in violation of the trust that the victims and their family put in the judicial system. Do not go looking for these photos. If you see them, report it immediately. Do not click on them. Do not spread them. Do not download it to your devices. It's a very serious matter. Don't become part of the case. Like Anya just said, do not be part of the case. And
Don't wanna
trust
be.
me, you
It's
will
not-
become part of the case if you do this. This happens, we see all the time, unfortunately, in the child pornography space, right?
Yeah.
It touches your devices, you're part of the case. Do not be that person. I hope I'm scaring you because you should be scared.
And don't
Um,
scar your soul either. You don't want to see this.
And also,
Maybe-
don't scar your soul. There is no good that can come from any of us looking at it. If this goes to trial and someone has to see this someone being jurors, I will promise you they will be unable to get it out of their minds for their entire lives, and it will be a mar on their memory. They will not want to see it. They will have to because they sit on the jury. This is not something you want to see. There are enough terrible things in the world. You do not need to go looking for them. So that's just our PSA. I know all of you are educated listeners and wouldn't do that anyway, but just in case you needed that reminder, here it is.
Or if anyone you know is trying to dig around and ask you, hey, where do I find them? And I just want to reiterate, like, you don't want to see, it's just like, yeah, it really messed with our heads for a long time. And I think it will continue to for a long time because, it's just not, this never should have happened. And then also the fact that it's led to, or very likely, kind of been tied to a possible, suicide is just adds to it. And it's just been an incredibly, like,
There was enough tragedy in this case,
Yeah, we didn't need more.
we did not need more.
And I want Anya talking about us going to the police about 8 hours or so after we got these pictures. That reminds me of something else, which was we've been talking a lot about this 136-page memorandum. And one of the themes of this memorandum seemed to be that the police and investigators in this case are either corrupt or stupid or what have you. And one of the police investigators they named was Indiana State Police Sergeant Jerry Holman. And he happened to be the person we reached when we contacted them about these materials. And I want to say he was incredibly professional during this. And when we first told him about it, he seemed to have a horror because he recognized there was a strong possibility, at least a 50-50 possibility, that this leak came from someone in law enforcement, someone he trusted. And he was just absolutely horrified. He didn't want to cover it up or anything like that.
He wasn't immediately like, the defense must have done it. Let's,
he was like, if this happened because a member of the law enforcement leaked this, we need to figure out who this is and get rid of them. So there's a little bit of a disjoint between how he was described in the memorandum and our impression of it.
Yeah.
So what's next?
There's going to be another hearing on Halloween where maybe we'll hear who gets appointed for this. I think there was a hearing last Halloween.
There was a press conference last Halloween, and we were also like manic and depressed at, with that, because at that point we were coming on a few days of like knowing that someone had been like detained in the Delphi case, but not knowing and like sitting on it and just being like,
so you guys get to enjoy Halloween. We haven't enjoyed Halloween for a couple of years.
we fled our home on Halloween and didn't come back until very late after all the trick-or-treaters had left. But yeah, this year it's going to be another Halloween, dealing with this, and it's going to be it'll be interesting. I'll be so interested to see how do these new defense attorneys adapt to this situation. Are they going to try to salvage and work with the Odinist conspiracy? Are they going to try to pare it down and make it less conspiratorial? Or are they going to just do something totally different and go their own route? Is it going to come to a trial, or is there going to, there could be anything that happens next, but we'll be really curious to see what that is.
And I want to say one thing about the Odinism thing. That's not what this is about tonight, but just Alice said something the last time we talked about this that I thought was so insightful, and I think now is even more so. And she talked about how when you read that filing, what you're reading is the interpretation of the defense attorneys of what they are seeing. They're making an argument. They're giving you an interpretation. And one thing I would say to people who read that and maybe were convinced, this is more evidence that maybe the filter that you saw that evidence through and that argument was given to you might not have been the best and most reliable filter. And I think that's something to remember when you think about whether or not the Odinism theory is likely given the evidence.
It was striking to us that the person who maybe was one of the originators of the theory, Todd Click, an investigator who worked on that, felt that it was sensationalized and disagreed with some of the central premises. He agreed with a lot of it, and he certainly agreed that the correct people had been identified as part of this. But he was very much like, it's not a religious sacrifice. So when we heard that, we kind of were like, okay, like it's just interesting that they kind of chose to kind of go even past what would be a pretty wild theory to begin with and make it even more out there. And I have theories on that, but we'll probably talk about that at some point on the show about the Odin. We'll all be kind of doing like a kind of a reflection, I'm sure, at some point about the Odinist element of all of this.
Absolutely. You guys have been up, I think, all day because I know you were probably waiting in line to make sure that you had front row seats to report back to all of us who are not in Indiana. So thank you for doing that. And thank you guys for agreeing to be on tonight with us. We know you're tired. You could be doing anything else. We absolutely love having you guys on.
We love being here. It's always a treat.
Yeah. It's always really fun to talk to you.
We're going to hold you to that and have you back
I know.
later,
Careful, because this case isn't going away.
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
I mean, with all that has happened today, there's a lot to be rattled about, to be upset about in this case. Do you have any parting words before we sign off for the night?
Oh man, just remember that the people in the center of prominent news stories are real people, and it's really easy to forget that. And I forget. I mean, like I remember when I was just a true crime consumer, you'd be like, oh, like these people, what are they doing? And like at the end of the day, the defense attorneys, people, the prosecutors, the cops, the defendant is a real person. The families are real people. The reporters trying to cover it are real people. And I think if we can all just remember that, and especially in light of the horrible outcome that this leak had in possibly contributing to a person's decision to take their life, I hope that we can just remember that and just kind of keep that in mind when we're commenting or kind of like, getting into these cases that, they're just human beings at the center of it. It's a very disturbing, messy, and troubling story, and people should be held accountable for wrongdoing. But at the same time, sometimes it's better to just wait to find out more facts or maybe just lead with compassion if you can.
And holding a person accountable doesn't mean you have to put your boot on their neck and start kicking them in the stomach.
Yeah, especially in the case of like this leak, we tried. I think for us it was a lesson. I mean, I'll tell you, we recorded a version of our report on the leak that was a lot more intense, and we will never release it.
Very angry.
It was pretty angry because we were feeling angry. We were feeling like this should never have happened, and I still feel angry on some level. But I think we tried to, just maybe lead more with the kind of like we can be very, very angry about what happened and the behavior, and perhaps want to hold some people accountable, but perhaps like jumping on people who made a mistake. Maybe we don't need to do that in this situation.
Such incredibly wise words. Thank you, Kevin and Anya. I absolutely agree. And I'm so glad that you guys are reporting on this case with such compassion and also with such integrity. And thank you for being on with us today. I'm sure it won't be the last time. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Thanks, guys.
Yay.
Thanks so much,
you guys.
You must be so tired.
Oh, I don't even feel that tired anymore. Like, we're past that. Not right now.
I got to tell you, when we have a long day like this and it's stressful, there's something relaxing about talking to you guys. It's kind of an exit.
Aw.
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
that's
Exit interview.
Wait, what
This is your debriefing.
Yeah.
You guys ask such good questions that kind of forces us to like think big picture and just not, like kind of we get bogged down in the details of this case a lot. So
Well, that means a lot coming from you as a reporter.
Yeah, you guys do not get bogged down in the details. That was actually one of the things that I was going to say was very impressive because it would be easy to do so. So thank you for sharing your knowledge on this case. And this case, 2023, man. Just a lot
This
going
has
on
been a
this year.
wild year. Yeah,
It really has.
Yeah, and like the Natalie Holloway thing, everyone was talking about that
know.
in the hallway. They're like, "What's going on with everything?"
Oh,
I
so
don't know.
sad.
And Murdaugh. And I do want to say,
And Murdaugh.
people asked about Murdaugh. This was totally expected. What the appeals court did is totally expected. When you file something like that, you got to have a hearing. I mean,
Yeah.
they were never going to deny that and say, "Oh, we don't worry about that."
Whereas this case, Delphi, is the unexpected case, right? Like all the other
Yeah.
cases, they're surprising, they're newsworthy, but they're all expected. This case, I literally never know what's going on. I was,
It's so crazy.
I was
Neither do
in.
we.
Yeah, so how many hours did you guys wait to get in
Oh,
line to get in?
So we woke up at what
5:30,
5:30, and then we went to
and we're up to like 2 or 3.
and then we went to Fort Wayne. Yeah, we're terrible about getting sleep. But we went to Fort Wayne, which is like 2 hours away. So we actually got there around the time when the courthouse was opening, which was perfect because it was pouring rain. And also, oh my God, we talked to some reporters outside because they were just like, okay, tell us about the leak. So we did that. And we looked like drowned rats because we like forgot our umbrella. So we're just out there like in the rain. Like it was very
Y'all looked great on TV.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Not like soaking wet, and it was pouring rain, so we actually just went in a hallway, much nicer than Carroll County Courthouse because you're inside and there's all these like little kind of church pews that you can sit in. So that was kind of nice. And we just talked with the different reporters, and we saw Bob Mata, defense director. So that was fun. Kind of
One
like
question we didn't ask you about that a lot of people asked, and I didn't know the answer to. So, we know cameras are disfavored in Indiana. Most stuff's not going to be televised. There's been this whole motion practice, but whether or not the trial will be televised. But then, like, you went to this different courthouse, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, they always televise stuff, so it probably will be televised." And sure enough, it sort of was for the 4 minutes it lasted.
Yeah. So what's
what's
that?
going on there?
Okay, I have a theory, but it's totally based on nothing but my own.
Well, first of all, this judge ran the pilot program for cameras in the courtroom.
So she's used to cameras and seems to like cameras to a certain extent because she ran that pilot program in this specific courtroom in this courthouse. So she's, I almost wondered if it had to do with like the fact that the defense was kind of getting called on the carpet and there was an element of like, I want this on camera. Gentlemen, you asked for cameras. Now you're getting the cameras.
And now you will get cameras.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I kind of felt that. I mean, maybe that's totally off base, but the fact that she's calling everyone to her home turf to do this just felt like.
Yeah, everything about it was kind of strange, right?
And not like unexplainable to us on the outside.
This is Prosecutors After Hours for those of you.
Yeah,
we always end these episodes and then keep talking for like
another hour.
Yeah, it was very strange.
That's a really good point, right? Wait, we've talked about this before, where it's not as simple as just flipping on a camera when you say you want cameras in the courtroom. And so it would make sense that if she wanted this televised, to do it in a courtroom where the camera angles knew where they were, if they had to block out certain things, they're well versed in how to do that in a way that you don't have bloopers on live TV, right? And so seems like she wanted this to be televised. And I think, again, it is very serious when you violate a court order. And this was serious, and it didn't have to do with Richard Allen specifically, that to have hope in kind of the integrity of the way she handled this case, I think she felt like she needed to have it televised.
I think so too.
And I just want to say there was a strange coincidence. I think about 20 years ago, this Judge Gull, heard a case of a murder. People always say she's a prosecutor's judge, but in this case, there were some discovery issues, and she ends up throwing the case out against the man who is accused of this murder.
Because the prosecutors hid exculpatory evidence pointing to a different person.
And it's hugely controversial in the city. The victim's wife is like weeping out in the hallway saying there's going to be no justice now. This happens about 20 years ago. Today, as we're driving up, we hear on the radio that another man has been arrested for that murder. And looking at the probable cause affidavit, it looks like a pretty strong case.
I just about crashed the car. I compulsively listen to music, and so I'm like da 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 da. And then suddenly we're on this radio station. They're like, in the case of Daniel Osborne, a former correctional officer in the subway murder. And I was like, am I losing? Am like this sleep deprivation? Because I mean, that was.
So she threw out a case that the prosecution was pursuing, and she turned out to be right.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was
Wow.
we heard
That's
that
wild.
today, and I was just like, I mean, dang, I mean, that must be gratifying because she definitely took a lot of heat for that back in the day.
I mean, I don't know this judge very well, especially because this hasn't been televised up to this point, but I really liked her in the 5 minutes that I saw her today. She seemed hopping mad, in a good way, in a judicial way. And there's also righteous anger, but I kind of liked what I was seeing. I was like, oh, you let him have it.
She's a former prosecutor, so she's done some interesting cases, and she has that righteous anger. The one thing I don't like that she does is she destroys reporters' phones, which is just terrifying to me.
like actually destroys them.
Oh my god, yes.
He literally destroys
the phone. We've tracked down one case where it actually happened, but we've not been able to contact that person to get their side of the story.
Yeah,
Probably
don't
too
have
scared to talk about
It's
it.
an urban
I want
legend
to know
that
how
actually
it
did happen.
happens.
But everybody
He has
else
like one of those like
Yeah.
like things that
Lower into
the
a vat of
teeth.
acid.
Yeah, exactly. And it like
It's
do you
terrifying.
guys think, and you may not know this, do you think it'll be a public defender, or do you think they'll do another private law firm appointment, or is there no telling?
I have no
There's
idea.
no telling.
telling. I just
Last time around, they had trouble finding a traditional public defender.
Gotcha.
Why is that? Because
no one
of
in Carroll County seemed to want to take the case.
no one in the surrounding area, because there's there's no public defender's office in Carroll County. There's private defenders who do public defender work, and so I think it was just they were like no one wanted.
This would be your only case for.
I was gonna say, and that would be difficult to do if you're a public defender. You wouldn't be able to clear your docket. You'd still be too busy, I think.
Yeah, it would be rough on anybody, and I mean, like with these attorneys, like I think they had to clear a lot of their stuff, and it just what a mess.
Yeah, I mean
It's gonna be interesting.
It is unfortunate that they put so much time into it, and you guys mentioned, and we said this in one of our when they got appointed, and we looked into them and everything else, and we thought, and I think I even said, not always right, guys.
Mhm.
The good thing about this was he was going to have good attorneys who knew what they were doing, and that would keep this case moving forward in a smooth fashion. I was wrong about that.
It's unfortunate. A lot of this is so unfortunate.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, and I don't know, I don't purport to know, but just viewing from the outside, everyone is capable of falling prey to fame, and
Look at the Murdoch case.
Look at the Murdoch case, especially with Becky Hill and everything that's happening. And everyone reacts differently when the spotlight's on them. And it may not even be conscious in the way you are. Some people go into themselves. Some people just become kind of a heightened version of themselves. And you never know quite how you're going to react in that situation. And so it's just, especially with that Odinism filing, as much as I thought it was, their interpretation of the facts or whatever, it was also look at me, look at what a great story I can tell. And it was probably the most read judicial filing of 2023, right? If not more than that. Like, way to go. You wrote a 136-page document that people wanted to read. But
it felt
great work of fiction.
It had elements that were undoubtedly pulpy, and I felt like I was like, oh, because like normally I have there's legal filings and I've gotten better at reading them, but oftentimes I'm like, what the heck does this mean to Kevin? But that I knew, and I was like, that's a problem.
Yeah,
because it's a press release. It's a press release.
Yeah.
A lot of it is a press release.
All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll actually let you go this time.
We need to let
this
you guys
has been
go
awesome.
sleep. Yes.
We'll get together. We probably won't get together on Halloween because it's Halloween. My favorite.
But
maybe November.
Yeah. And if this ever goes to trial, we're planning on moving to Indiana, so maybe we can get we can get a house together.
Yes. Or Carroll County, I guess. That's
yeah.
Oh my god.
All right. Well,
thanks, guys.
Farewell to everyone. See you guys later.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for coming
weekend.
and watching.
No, thank you guys. We'll see you again very soon.
Yeah. We'll send you the audio.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye, guys.